Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Here we are on June 6th, 2024, and not only is it 2 days after the premiere of the first 2 episodes of the newest Star Wars series entitled The Acolyte on Disney+, it's also the day after Kathleen Kennedy's 71st birthday.
Yes.
And you undoubtedly know who she is. She's the president of Lucasfilm, who's responsible for hiring Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, Leslie Headland, to create The Acolyte. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please share the video on social media, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! On June 4th, I released a video entitled, How Bad Is the Acolyte Going to Be? The Force's Female and Pronouns in Star Wars Now. In that video, I talked about several things that critic Alan Ng from Film Threat had shared on X about what he saw in the first 4 episodes of the Acolyte series. And with regards to the first 2 episodes, he said that many viewers may think to themselves that the show isn't horrible. Now, having watched the first 2 episodes myself, I agree with what Alan Ng said because on the surface, no, the first 2 episodes don't look awful, but when you start to dig into them, you'll begin to see a number of flaws. But I will also say one thing positive about the first episode. At just under 37 minutes long, that was around 17 minutes shorter than the 54-minute long first episode of Dave Filoni's series Ahsoka that premiered on Disney Plus last year. And the first episode of Ahsoka was excessively long, slow-paced, and incredibly boring. That's not the case with the first episode of The Acolyte, which was far more fast-paced and, in my own opinion, possibly a little too much so. But I want to point out one of the most glaring problems that I see in the first 2 episodes. The character of Mae, as being played by the non-binary actress Amandla Stenberg, is so far a very one-dimensional character, whose only purpose in the story is to kill Jedi, and while there's a motivation behind her actions, there's something rather amusing about that, which occurs at the end of the second episode. But I'll get into that later in the video. I'm also not exactly sure whether Mae should be regarded as a foil character or the actual villain, since she seems to be taking orders from an as-of-yet unnamed Sith Lord, who's barely in the first episode and not in the second episode. But if we want to understand Mae, then we have to talk about the plot of the first episode, and a lot of the clips that were included in the March teaser were taken from this episode. The episode doesn't begin with a traditional Star Wars crawl, but with a series of flat, unmoving paragraphs. 100 years before the rise of the Empire, it is a time of peace. The Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic have prospered for centuries without war. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, a powerful few learn to use the Force in secret. One of them, a lone assassin, risks discovery to seek revenge. So that third line is essentially the singular purpose of the one-dimensional character of Mae, and that's it. So after those 3 brief paragraphs, we see Mae, of course, on a planet named Ueda, and behind her are what look like ruins from the Halo video games. I know because I played Halo back in the day. Then, as shown in the March teaser, and as I had talked about in a video that I had released at the time, we see her from the back as she walks through a gate towards a village. And then she walks into the restaurant/bar and walks up to a table where Jedi Master Indara, as played by Carrie-Anne Moss, is seated with a number of other patrons who are essentially irrelevant in the story. Mae, who's wearing her cheap dime store pandemic-era black face mask, calls Indara by name, and Indara says, quote, "Yes, my child," unquote, before Mae then tells her that they have unfinished business and tries to talk Indara into fighting her, but to no avail. So Mae then has a temper tantrum of sorts, but not as overacted as those of Kylo Ren in Jar Jar Abrams' Star Wars VII The Force Awakens, but more along the lines of Ziyi Zhang's character of Jin in the restaurant scene from Ang Lee's 2000 movie, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I have brought up before in my earlier descriptions of the Acolyte via its teasers and trailers. I can also draw a comparison between Mae and the character of Veruca Salt from the 1971 movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, as well as the 2005 movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because Mae comes across as being just as selfish, narcissistic, and one-dimensional. But the Veruca Salt character works well in both of those movies because she's a secondary character, while Mae is one of the principal characters in The Acolyte. Anyway, after seeing more of the fight between Mae and Indara than was shared in the various teasers and the trailer before the show premiered, I was right about one thing that I had speculated about in my May video that was about the May 4th trailer, which was whether Indara dies in the fight scene, and she does. But what makes no sense is that Carrie-Anne Moss is the biggest star that they have in this show, and her character gets killed off in the first scene of the first episode. Does that make sense? No. Sure, there are going to be some flashbacks with her in later episodes, but killing her off so quickly was a very poor writing decision as far as I'm concerned. And that's mainly due to the fact that we don't really know anything about Indara beyond her being a Jedi Master before she's killed, and that makes it difficult for an audience to be empathetic towards her. But since Mae is seen without her face mask in the restaurant by various witnesses who she did not kill, including the barkeeper, the Jedi are all convinced about who they think the killer is, a former Padawan of Jedi Master Soul, as played by Lee Jung-jae. And that Padawan's name was Osha, not Mae. Uh-oh, yep, Disney did indeed accidentally give away a big first episode reveal. Mae has a twin sister named Osha, who's also being played by Amandla Stenberg, and Osha is a washed-up Padawan who went to work as a mech-neck, which is a human being doing the job of an astromech droid on board spaceships. And what's really funny, OSHA is the acronym for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Plus, twins in Star Wars, who'd have imagined that?
They're showing a lot of florals right now, so I was thinking I could
Florals?
do a shoot.
For spring. Groundbreaking.
Oh wait! Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia are the twin children of Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. So while Osha is on board a Trade Federation ship working as a mech-neck when Indara was killed, the Jedi think that Osha is responsible because of the barkeeper from Ueda identifying her. And here's where we get to see the Jedi Knight Yord Thandar, as played by Charlie Barnett, who thinks that Anakin Skywalker destroyed the Death Star, and Yord Thandar is a bit of an idiot Jedi.
But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this right now.
You should just shut up.
It's just like,
shut up.
I'd even go so far as to say that maybe he was a special needs Padawan because his behavior is un-Jedi-like, with him continually being impatient, fearful, and jumping to wrong conclusions. I doubt he's going to be anyone's favorite character, but the most likable Jedi character in the show so far is Jedi Master Soul, because he's the only one that actually comes across as being a Jedi. Yord first shows up on the Trade Federation ship along with his snooty Padawan to arrest Osha and puts her onto a droid-operated prison transport with some rather nasty criminals who manage to take over the transport, break out of their cells, and escape in the life pods. And Osha, being the kind-hearted person that she apparently is, attempts to save a very dangerous criminal that the others left behind. But he's freaked out by Osha and takes the only remaining escape pod for himself. So Osha straps herself into a chair using its safety belts, because she is named after the Occupational Safety and Health Administration after all, as the damaged, out-of-control prison transport crashes onto the snowy planet of Karlak, which to me sounds like a suppository like X-Lax. But in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant is where we first see Jedi Master Sol, who's busy teaching a class of younglings. And I was wrong about this particular scene possibly being a flashback when clips of it were shown at the beginning of the March teaser, so the young black girl Padawan in the scene isn't a young Mae or Osha. And Sol's former teacher turns out to be the green alien Jedi Master Vernestra Rwoh, as played by Leslie Headland's real-life wife, Rebecca Henderson, who then uses the Force to open the door before entering the classroom where Sol is teaching to tell him about Indara's death and that they believe that his former Padawan Osha is the killer. Opening the door with the Force was shown briefly in the March teaser, and now that I know that she was entering a classroom, maybe she's a germaphobe and didn't want to touch the doors that a lot of children are using. Unlike Sol, Vernestra Rwoh is more of a politician than a Jedi, as she seems more concerned about political enemies learning about Indara's death at the presumed hands of a former Padawan than the Jedi Order itself. Vernestra orders Sol to go to find Osha on Karlak, after he says he wants to find his old Padawan, and he takes his current Padawan named Jeki, who is the bluish-skinned alien as played by Daphne Keane, and Yord Thandar. While en route to Karlak, Sol explains that Osha had a twin sister named Mae, and that as far as he and everyone else is concerned, is believed to be dead after a bad fire. In fact, Osha thinks Mae is dead too and has a force vision of Mae after she crashes on Karlak. But as it turns out, neither Yord nor Jeki know anything about Osha having a twin because there's no record of that in the Jedi's records, which sounds an awful lot like the plot element of the Jedi not knowing about the existence of the planet Kamino because it's not in their records in George Lucas's movie Star Wars II: Attack of the Clones. The Acolyte sounds a little bit derivative, doesn't it? Anyway, on Karlak, Sol, Yord, and Jeki find Osha, who was in a cave, and then Sol saves her from falling over a cliff, which went against her namesake, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. But this is when she tells Sol that Mae is alive, and he believes her before we get one last look at Mae on a watery world, talking to the guy in the distance as shown in the March teaser, who turns out to be the Sith Lord. And that ends the first episode. Wasn't that exciting? But let's press onward. The second episode opens on the planet Olega, which sounds a lot like Ortega, where we find Mae sneakily gain entry into a Jedi temple that's located there because there's a Jedi inside that she wants to kill. Surprise, surprise. And his name is Master Torben, as played by Dean Charles Chapman, who was clearly in need of acting work. And according to the show, Torben has been in a continuous meditative state for 10 years, which I find somewhat unbelievable given that meditating that long would preclude being able to eat, drink, urinate, take a shit, or bathe during that entire time. So unless the other Jedi who are there have been feeding and watering him, and have been keeping a bedpan or litter box underneath him, he'd already be dead. But it may explain why there's an open skylight right above him. It's a way for the Jedi to keep a continuous flow of air going and hopefully take his stink out through the roof like a bathroom ceiling exhaust fan. But as shown in the March teaser and May 4th trailer, this is the other Jedi shown with Mae trying to attack him, but she apparently can't due to him having the equivalent of a Force shield surrounding himself as he endlessly meditates. That or her abilities are repelled by his obvious unbathed stench filling the room. It's a bit of a toss-up here knowing whether the Force, his stench, or a combination of the two is defeating her efforts. So she instead heads over to visit her buddy Kamir, as played by Manny Jacinto, at an apothecary to have him make her a poison to kill Torben, which he puts into a cylindrical bottle that she then wears like a necklace, just as she's briefly shown in the May 4th trailer. This is also where Kamir says his big line, quote, "The Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace," unquote. He then starts to go on to say, quote, "and peace," unquote, but is then interrupted by Mae, who says, quote, "is a lie, I know," unquote. And it's likely that only very hardcore Star Wars fans would know that the line, quote, "peace is a lie," unquote, is the first line of the Sith Code. Normies won't know that. In the meantime, Sol, Jecki, Yord, and Osha arrive at Olega and go to the Jedi Temple just in time for Mae to return, crawl through the open ventilation skylight above smelly Master Torban, then kneel down in front of him and anticlimactically guilt-trip him into waking up, apologize to her, and drink the poison rather than face the Jedi Council over something that he did a decade earlier. So that's yet another part of the mystery regarding one-dimensional Mae, who slips back out while Osha, who had walked away from the other Jedi in the temple, finds Torben's dead body first, and initially doesn't look good when the other Jedi find her over the body. You know, much like when a similar incident that happened to Harry Potter in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. No, the Acolyte isn't going to be known for originality. But as it turns out, pain-in-the-ass Yord had followed Osha and knew that she didn't kill Torben, so she's off the hook. The Jedi then try to get Kamir at the apothecary to spill the beans by having Osha pretend to be Mae, but he quickly sees through that. But Sol then has an opportunity to confront Mae, who then tries to attack him, just as what was shown in the March teaser and May 4th trailer. And Sol wants to know who trained her, but she won't tell him, of course, and while she tries to escape him by attempting to steal some alien's car, she and Osha then see each other. And that's essentially the end of the second episode. But this presents an interesting dilemma for the series because Mae's apparent motivation for killing Jedi is her belief that they killed her twin sister, Osha. So with Mae seeing Osha alive in person, that effectively destroys Mae's entire motivation and much of the plot for the entire series. And this was only the second episode with 6 more to go. And most of the marketing material for this series is focused primarily on the notion that someone is killing Jedi. But since both the characters and the audience know exactly who is doing that, that only leaves the mystery of who the Sith Lord in the series is, what happened 10 years before the events of the first 2 episodes, and the more esoteric concept of who's allowed to use the Force. And that last point isn't actually relevant since George Lucas himself said in the early 1980s that anyone could learn how to use the Force. But are normies actually going to care about any of that? They might possibly care about who the Sith Lord is, since he seems to be the one directing one-dimensional Mae's actions. But I highly doubt that they'll care so much about what occurred 10 years earlier, since the characters themselves aren't that interesting for the most part, and normies are far less likely to care about who's allowed to use the Force. Going forward, we already know from the teasers and the trailer that there are going to be a lot of flashbacks that go back 10 years prior that will include a younger actress portraying the younger Mae and her twin sister, Osha. But one thing that's really funny about all of this is that none of these issues within the series actually have anything to do with its woke aspects, which I haven't even had to talk about yet, because this show has so many other serious problems with lack of adequate narrative development, poor marketing, and poor acting. So let's address the acting itself. Carrie-Anne Moss was fine playing a Jedi, but she's only in part of the first episode before her character of Indara is killed off by Mae, but we know that she shows up later in some flashbacks as shown in the teasers and the trailer. Lee Jung-jae is doing a good job of playing Jedi Master Sol, and he's by far the most interesting character in the entire series. But Rebecca Henderson's portrayal of Vernestra Rwoh feels somewhat wooden. Charlie Barnett's portrayal of Yord Thandar has inconsistencies, suggesting that the directors weren't exactly sure what to do with him. Manny Jacinto as Kamir is only a minor character so far, and Daphne Keane as Sol's current Padawan Jecki is essentially just a sidekick character so far. So both Kamir and Jecki have very little character development, as does Moss's character of Indara, which was stunted by killing her off so early on. The unnamed Sith Lord character is also incredibly minor at this point in the series and is currently just a bad guy behind the curtains trope. So that only really leaves Amandla Stenberg, who is only in her early 20s, and her lack of acting experience is very apparent with her one-dimensional portrayal of Mae, and her portrayal of Osha isn't particularly inspiring either. I personally view burdening such an inexperienced actor with attempting to portray two very different characters in the same show as being a poor casting choice, but Leslie Headland, in her own words, built this entire show specifically around the actress of Amandla Stenberg, and I have no doubt that she did that specifically because of how intersectional Stenberg is by being non-binary, gay, and a person of color. That's it. In comparison, Ziyi Zhang's portrayal of Jen in Ang Lee's 2000 movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon wasn't well received back in the day, but she acted a heck of a lot better in that movie than Amandla Stenberg is in The Acolyte. And in Ang Lee's movie, Zhang had to portray two distinct aspects of her same character, which came across as being much more convincing than what Stenberg is doing now. So would I recommend anyone to watch The Acolyte? No, not at all. While this show doesn't have the same types of problems as Dave Filoni's Ahsoka series had, presenting something like this that has no previously known Star Wars characters in it places a tremendous burden on this show's actors to very quickly build enough audience interest to keep them sufficiently motivated and interested to continue watching the show through all 8 of its episodes. Visually, The Acolyte looks like Star Wars, but most of the characters in this series aren't that interesting, and part of the reason for that is poor writing, inadequate direction, and a combination of mostly uninspired, wooden, or inexperienced acting. Lee Jung-jae as Jedi Master Soul can't carry this entire series on his shoulders alone, but that's essentially the position that he's been put in. Maybe Jodie Turner-Smith will be interesting when she finally shows up.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.